In 1952, Washington, D.C. experienced something so extraordinary, it seemed as if it was coming straight out of a 1950s sci-fi film. In a span of over 2 weeks, between July 12th and July 29, multiple crafts of unknown origins were witnessed and videotaped, hovering over Washington, D.C. area and over the White House itself. The frightening events took a dramatic turn when at 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19, 1952, Edward Nugent, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, spotted 7 objects at his radar southwest of the city. None of the objects were following any established flight paths. Nugent's boss, Harry Barnes, a senior air traffic controller, watched the objects on the radar scope. He later wrote, "We knew immediately that a very strange situation existed. Their movements were completely radical compared to those of ordinary aircrafts." Barnes had 2 controllers check Nugent's radar. They found that it was working normally. Barnes then called the National Airport's radar-equipped control tower. The controllers there, Howard Coughlin and Joey Zacco, they said that they had unidentified blips on their radar screen, and that they had, quote, seen a bright light hovering in the sky. It took off, zooming away at incredible speeds. Coughlin told Zacco, "Did you see that? What the hell was that?" The same objects were later filmed flying over the White House. Superior Harry Barnes at the Washington National Airport later recounted the UFOs as being objects which appeared to be like orange balls of fire, trailing a trail. It was like anything I had ever seen before. Air Force Major Generals John Semford had a press conference July 29, 1952, which ended up being the largest Pentagon press conference since World War II. Semford declared that the visual sightings over Washington could be explained away as misidentified aerial phenomenon, stars, and asteroids. Semford also stated that the unknown radar targets could be a weather phenomenon called temperature inversion, which happened to be present in the air over Washington on both of the nights that the radar returns were reported. To the public, this explanation was something close to a swamp gas theory.
But you don't fool Jesus. It's Bush League psycho stuff. Laughable, man.
It obviously could not account for the hundreds of witnesses, as well as the video and radar evidence in full. Dr. James E. McDonald, a well-known physicist at the University of Arizona in the 1960s, examined the evidence for Washington sightings, including speaking with 4 pilots and 5 radar personnel who were involved with the 1952 Washington incident. In front of the Committee on Science and Astronautics at the U.S. House of Representatives, he explained that the temperature inversion theory used to explain the unknown radar traces was quite untenable, and that in his opinion, the 1952 Washington UFO incident was an instance of unidentified aerial objects over our capital. There's a CIA document that essentially details the Air Force's insistence in 1966 to acquire the CIA materials on unidentified flying objects, including the findings of a secret 1953 report. The panel was comprised of scientists who were to examine the wave of reports of unidentified flying objects at the time. As you may or may not know, in 1966, the Condon Committee, a group funded by the United States Air Force, concluded that studying UFOs was unlikely to yield major scientific discoveries. Well, according to this CIA document, the Air Force requested multiple times that the CIA release those UFO findings from 1953. In other words, the United States Air Force was initially not given all the information about UFOs. Also, when the document was finally given, it was heavily censored. Here's what this document memo says. Inasmuch as my reviews of the original material showed that significant deletions would be required for further declassification, I suggested that Mrs. Hunt ask the Air Force originator to submit a second request if they wanted declassification of additional materials from the minutes and case histories. In general, the report says that the sightings were too quick or lacking in physical traces that allowed them to conclude scientifically that what they were seeing was actual extrastellar crafts. The report goes on to say, the panel could not accept any of the cases cited because they were raw, unvaluated reports. Terrestrial explanations of the sightings are suggested in some cases. In others, the time of the sightings was too short as to cause suspicion of visual impressions. Which is just another way of saying, we doubt the witness's ability to see something extraordinary. That's no surprise, as the document later details part of the reasoning. It was noted that present astronomical knowledge of the solar system makes the existence of intelligent beings, as we know the term, elsewhere than on Earth extremely unlikely. In addition to having the wrong reasoning and an antiquated scientific backing that would undoubtedly make the scientists extremely biased, the scientists were still hesitant regarding some of their conclusions. As is quoted here, one of the panel members in his presentation showed how he had eliminated each and no improbable cause of sightings, leaving him extraterrestrial as the only remaining in many cases. His background as an aeronautical engineer and technical intelligence officer could not be slighted. Basically, there's one guy who gets it, but nobody else is willing to listen. Where have we seen this before? What is also strange is how they view public UFO groups. Quote, the panel took cognizance of the existence of such groups as the Civilian Flying Saucers Investigators and the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization. It was believed that such organizations should be watched because of their potentiality of great influence on mass thinking if widespread sightings should occur. The apparent irresponsibility and the possible use of such groups for subversive purposes would be kept in mind. So let me get this straight. So in the off chance that we have a mass invasion type sighting, the CIA's primary concern is that the UFO groups might be correct and that they're going to use some imaginary influence to create some kind of subversive ways or actions? What? Oh, wait, it's the 1950s. According to an abstract written in September 1952, Soviet astronomer F0 is quoted as stating that UFOs may be optical illusions, flying objects created on Earth, unknown natural phenomenon, or objects of other planets. This last hypothesis is supported by the fact that UFOs exhibit a tremendous speed, which presupposes highly developed remote control. So, the author of this document had no problem acknowledging the possibility of UFOs being extraterrestrial as a likely hypothesis back in the 1950s. But in modern times, we have to deal with this.
For all I know, we may be visited by a different extraterrestrial civilization every second Tuesday. But there's no support for this appealing idea. The extraordinary claims are not supported by extraordinary evidence.
In 1967 memorandum from the director of the National Photographic Interpretation Center detailed the performed photo analysis of a few photographs taken by Major R.W. Niles, get this, from the United States Air Force. The conclusion? The office cannot shed any light on the authenticity of this alleged UFO from photo analysis. However, there is no definite evidence that this photography is a hoax. The reason why they could not shed any light to the authenticity of the UFO is because the investigation was primarily focused in determining the geometry of the craft, not to evaluate whether the major of the Air Force is making a prank. Here's what they determined the craft looks like. So you see, those skeptics hold on to this notion that the government is against the concept of UFOs. If you actually read between the lines of the documents from the CIA themselves, there's quite a different story that is told. This is Felipe Osorio. Thanks for joining me. Signing out.